Yeah, Brian starts that discussion with trauma that informed his life. And I think that's useful when we're starting to try and grow into who we're called to be, that to acknowledge that some of these more painful experiences have stuck us somewhere. And because of the pain of them, we anesthetize rather than live in that reality that keeps replaying in our minds. I think when I hear Brian talk about it, I think of the people that suffer with PTSD and depression. And for a long time, it wasn't a diagnosis for veterans because they thought, that's just not manly or it's not whatever. But it became real when they saw the aberrant behavior that comes from being stuck in trauma cycles. And the only way out of a trauma cycle is to acknowledge, yes, this happened, and yes, I was brought through it. And if I haven't been brought through it, then I need to be brought through it, even if it's decades later. I need to be brought through it in a safe environment to recognize that it's possible to go forward. And so, I mean, it informs a lot to know that informed Brian's life in the way it did, because what we never hear from Brian is about being raised in a small Utah town and all the outdoors and wholesome things that must have been going on. And I know there's dysfunction in every family, but if you're raised in a rural community, the likelihood is there was a lot of outdoors and clean living. And, I mean, some of the other stuff may be masked, but the reality is, but all of that gets stolen from us, and we have no joy in our childhood, and so we don't even know what to do with it. And so how do you survive 7 years of homelessness when you've had some level of success? Well, because you never enjoyed those times of success because you were stuck in that traumatic experience that you never outgrew. Well, watching Brian, anyone that knows me has heard me talk with Brian. Wayne had a way of just like searching the highways and byways and dragging scallywags out from under bushes and bringing them to my house. That just was his thing. And one of them was Brian. And Brian had the look of somebody I recognized as, he had been out on the street long enough that he didn't have nothing, but whatever he did have, you weren't getting it. And so what I was taken by is he would come into the house and it was crowded. And it's not easy for any of our population to be in crowded places. But somehow every Thursday and every Friday we'd get crowded into this little room and we'd all get something to eat and we'd do this PON broadcast because we're in the middle of a pandemic. And poor Brian would be sitting in the corner trying to stay away from everybody clutching whatever the hell nonsense he'd carried in there. I knew he didn't own anything worth having. That's from the look of him. But he was completely shell-shocked. He looked like, it was obvious to talk about PTSD. This was a guy that obviously was stuck in the trauma of war. And it had been largely a war within himself, because I watched him over time. He kept coming back and he would eat a little bit and he'd walk a little further from his plate. And in time, I just saw him start to come out of that. And it wasn't until we were opening New Freedom and Wayne came to me and said, Brian wants to work in the kitchen. Can we hire him as a dishwasher? And we had a chef and we had a few people in the center, and all I could think of was, Brian, are you sure he can do it without hurting himself? Right? So from dishwasher to when my father was no longer able to live alone, we had to move him out. A few of my friends came to help me do it because it was very traumatic for me. And Brian starts displaying all these skills, disconnecting the oven, disconnecting the dishwasher, doing all these things. And I'm like, this is this homeless motherfucker. What are you doing in the freaking kitchen? You got all these skills. What are you doing in the kitchen? And it wasn't long after that that we just started elevating him. But you know, it's a real testament to how Brian was thinking of himself was radiating out of him to other people's thoughts. And until he started doing some actions that proved to me he was not who he thought he was, did anyone see the reason to provide other opportunities. So it's so important that people realize that you need to start acting in your destiny so people can see you. Because people like comebacks. They're going to help you. But they need to see you participating. Or they just pigeonhole you. So if you're pigeonholed, what are you showing them? I think it's a powerful story.